So I'm just going to do a quick survey of the room. So how many of you are developers here? Okay, some. Like, why are you here? So you want to learn about games of service. Maybe you're part of a more money, more money. Okay, truth comes out. All right. Well, I'm gonna go over my experience in the industry. Trying to make more money. I'll try to cover in this lecture not only about some of the basic things that you might know about free to play and what it is to win mind share over to make more money, as a gentleman put it. But I could tell you that it's beyond just user acquisition or discovery. Certainly monetization, back to your point. I think it's really about the people. It's about the gamers. It's about people that's making the games. I'm going to turn off my phone, sorry. Yeah, so here we go. Typically, I think when we think about winning mind shares and talk about monetization, we hear terminologies like ARPU and DAU and MAU and stop me anytime, but ARPU DAO. You guys all know what this means, right? So it's about how much money someone might make in a day, in a week, in a month, and then what that average revenue per user on a daily basis might be. So that's all good and nice, but I'll start with a brief intro and then go into some context about the industry, some stats, and then what I think games as a first service is to me, and why I'm here after 21 years. So yeah, I'm kind of old. Been doing this for a long time. I would say I have a pretty atypical background. I started as a pixel miner or digital artist. My first 10 years, I've worked on games like Wing Commander at Origin Systems. I joined Square to work on titles like Parasite Eve, Final Fantasy, you might have heard of them. I would say in the second half of my career, I sort of really got into free-to-play and working on the other side, sort of pushing the pixels, if you will, and learning what it is to service the users, games as a service, as it were. I've also been dabbling in virtual reality. I've got some people that I used to work with actually 20 years ago that has a VR shop in Los Angeles. I'm helping them really continue what we started, which is interactive entertainment or games as a service now, because we're all connected. I tell some people, say, oh yeah, they didn't have internet when I was doing games. So what do you mean they didn't have internet? They just assume internet was around forever, right? But I think that's probably another big factor that we could go into later. Okay, so how many of you think about games as a service? I mean, what kind of games do you play? When you think about games as a service, what do you guys think about? Do you think about, Candy Crush on a mobile, or do you think about, Clash of Clans? What is games as a service to you? And why do you think you could generate more revenue by servicing your users better? I think back to my point, I think it's ultimately about the people that are playing it. It's the people that are creating the content, making the pixels, as it were. It's entertainment on connected devices. Again, there's been some, I think, changes in the behavior, how we actually consume the content. I think since I was making games back in the 90s, a lot has changed. We're not on these big 46 boxes anymore that we sort of go gold master and ship. Rather, The real problem begins when we go live. That's when the real headache begins. Hence the, again, reference to service and people. It used to be that you sort of create the content, so the people that make the content would create the content, 100 people, 200 people, work on it for 2 years, go to Hawaii, come back, recharge and do it all over again. Work on Final Fantasy 8 and 9 and so forth. I think that's changed a great deal, again, back with the internet. And the reason I think I'm still doing it after 20 years, pre and post internet, I think it's the people, again. I think it's my love for what I do. I think it's the passion in the people that I work with. I've been really fortunate to work with some amazing producers and artists and programmers. I think it's the passion that we share, creating those pixels, and ultimately servicing them, because it is really about entertainment. I think we have to kind of go back to real basics. I don't want to bore you with maybe the obvious, but games are supposed to be fun, and if you really love what you're doing with the people that you create, I think that'll reflect. And then back to your point about money, you can't really make money if your game sucks, right? So hopefully it'll be fun, and then you can worry about your ARPUs and ARPU DAOs. By the way, how many of you heard about the Flurry news yesterday? Okay, maybe one. Okay, half the room. All right, so I'm not sure what the valuation of that company is, but I think it sort of shows the trend of another latest acquisition of what it means to sort of provide games as a service and what those metrics mean behind the service. Rumor has it that Yahoo's going to pay something north of $300 million for Flurry. I guess you guys probably all know what Flurry is. Okay, I see one head nod, but I'm going to assume the rest of you know. I think some might argue that Flurry was purchased for $300+ million because they represent, over 540,000 apps on smartphones and tablets, which is on over 1.4 billion devices worldwide. But I think it's actually the people that created the platform, the analytics platform, that was able to get those apps, analyze those apps, that wrote the code that made Flurry, basically. Also, this July was back to the internet and no internet. So to me, it's fairly new, right? After 20 years, the whole idea of the App Store, which is now 6 years old, it seems new to me. I mean, I know it's not new, but if you look at some of the stats, what has happened? What has Apple created, and then all the players that have come since with this new ecosystem, right? Well, I guess you have over 1 million apps that are available on this one specific app store, and there are many others. And there have been over 75 billion apps downloaded. So, I don't know, that's a lot of zeros, right? 75 billion. Apparently there are 3 billion hours a week of people playing games. Not all those apps are games, but I think over 80+% are apps. Or games, again, games as a service. Right, some stats. So in 2014, I guess we have, again, over 1 billion devices, all connected, according to IDC. And the other sort of, well, it's not new per se, but the other sort of ecosystem that has emerged with the introduction of the internet, the App Store, and messaging apps. I'm sure you've heard of most of these. I don't know if there's a pointer here, but I'm sure you've heard of the acquisition of WhatsApp, of course. Probably heard of Kakao in Korea. Of course, you know WeChat or Weixin from Tencent. And flurry of others that are not on there. But again, I think it's about people changing their behavior and how they consume the content. Again, interactive games or games as a service. And what that means to us as a developer, as a publisher, and as a analytics company, or even gambling company. Games for real money wager, which is coming soon if it's not already live. I know there are at least 3 apps that I know of that are live in the App Store, in the Apple iOS store. There's going to be many more coming. Another client that I consult for, Gamblet, is another one that you'll probably hear about. Right, back to more stats. And then I'm going to sort of try to, again, go back to maybe Captain Obvious, but avoid some of the myths that you sort of hear about, or mistakes that you can avoid. A lot of companies, I think, create compelling content, or they sort of find that loop. They find that loop or mechanic to make more money. But I think you have to realize that's a very short-term outlook. Also, as an industry, which is fairly new, native apps are at best, has a life cycle of maybe 12 months, probably 6 months at best, on average, right? But just based on that one app alone, you're not gonna go IPO, although a lot of people are trying. I think what's in your favor is you have a big, wide sort of user base, so you could sort of cross-promote and leverage that audience, again, as a service, assuming your content is fairly good. But that doesn't really guarantee success either. Also, I think most importantly, not everyone needs to be Supercell, and not everyone's gonna, people talk about like, oh, we're gonna go find the next Clash of Clans, or we're gonna find another next Angry Birds. Well, I'm sure you guys know this, but those guys didn't just kind of pop out of the woodwork just overnight. They've been doing this for a long, long time, and I think over the years, and over iterations and mistakes that they made, they sort of finally hit on that final product, which is the 52nd, I think, iteration is the Angry Birds that we know. Clash of Clans might have started when no one heard about them as a tablet game company, but I think they built on something unique, which is leveraging users and how they behave, and again, using games as a service to bring them in and monetize. Again, I don't think you could assume you could buy your way to #1 because you have a hit game. First of all, I mean, you can't afford to do so. Some of these companies like Supercell, King, and Gung Ho, I can't share real numbers, but I could tell you that they're spending over, $1 million per day doing user acquisition. So, if you got that kind of money, you should probably focus on development rather than user acquisition, and then think about games as a service. Then I think possibly you might have enough users to leverage to go IPO. Cross promotions are nice if you have a big user base, but I mean, don't expect miracles again. It's great to get featured by Apple and Google, but that's not going to guarantee success either. And I think the last thing the world needs is another card game, which is a lot of these games like Puzzles and Dragons, and there's just a card game, right? One-handed mechanic. I think ultimately we have to go back to the basics about making fun games. Games are interactive experiences, not like a linear one, like a film, but you get to sort of interact, hence the reference to the service, very much like a restaurant, right? And it's not about your ARPU, and it's not about all these terminologies that we sort of loosely throw around. I think it's about the people that are on your team, that are making the game, and hopefully creating something compelling. Again, I just keep emphasizing the people fact, because ultimately it's about the audience as well as the the developers that are making these products. So, and it's not necessarily the brands. If you license something from Disney, that's not going to guarantee you success and IPO. And it's not your tech, and it's not your code. One of the most successful games to date, you guys probably heard of Riot Games, League of Legends. So to quote Brendan Beck, who has the most compelling, most profitable, monetizing games in the history of mankind, he notes that it's really about the people and the team that's behind Riot Games. And the League of Legends is really a phenomenon that I think is only kind of coming to fruition, sort of like version 1, in my opinion. I think you see a lot more from them. But they're successful, I think, because they're focusing on the product and the service. I think ultimately that's what it's going to come down to between the people that surface to the top because they're buying their way. I think that'll be short-lived on the app stores. I think it's going to be about people that actually focus on the brand, on the experience and the content that is your game, and service it well, better than anyone else. I think those are the ones that you'll see come to surface to the top. Again, I mentioned Clash of Clans, Candy Crush, and Puzzles and Dragons, all great games, but I think it's ultimately about the service. One other factor, I think, someone mentioned this yesterday too. There's a trend in mobile games. I think a lot of companies are doing sort of mid-core to hardcore games, mainly because there's more hours and more engagement, so they assume that they're going to monetize. So that's a good assumption. But I think what we sort of overlook is how sort of immensely social hardcore gamers are. It's not about your consumable goods and sort of as a key source of revenue and reliance on a certain platform, but I think it's again back to basics, emphasis on the games, and the experience really. It's not build it and they'll come, but build the experience, make it fun, and then you can really leverage the massively incremental growth that is mobile, which I think is just beginning. So yeah, I think I know it's a 20-minute lecture, so I'm gonna sort of pause there and take any questions. I know it's early and maybe you guys are shy, but if you have any questions, I'm ready for you.
Thomas, what is the biggest challenge in your mind facing the free-to-play gaming market today?
I think it's about the noise. I think it's about the overcrowded 8 gazillion apps that are in the store. Secondly, I think the top 10 apps in the app stores that are making $500 million a year. The challenge is to compete with those people to buy, audience and mind share, and most people don't have $1 million a day to spend, so that's probably the biggest challenge.
If you had to pick maybe one solution to that challenge, what would you recommend?
Can't beat them, join them. No, I think really, I would recommend again, probably because this is a biased opinion, as a developer in my former life. I think it's about getting a team of people that actually you like to work with, or preferably you have worked with before. Maybe you've worked on PC or console games, but whether it's iOS or whether it's VR, it's just another platform, right? There's no disruption there. I think this disruption is really the number of people that are coming onto your software, your product. So. Yeah, I mean, I would just say back to the basics. That's the only advice that I could really think about as a former developer.
Cool. Anybody have questions for Thomas Lee and Thomas Lee's scarf? This man over there.
Just a quick question. The free-to-play games, is there any regulations coming up that will change how free-to-play games are going to be defined? Because I've been reading some reports that because they are offering inside-out purchases, that there are going to be some restriction on how you define a free-to-play game.
Sure.
Do you know anything about that, or how this is going to be regulated?
So I think there's actually a lecture just that I read. I also read probably the same article that you read.
Probably.
Yeah, I think I have it in my notes, and I'll share it with you after the talk. But there's nothing in the works. There's no legislation. There's no law per se. But I think the article that I read, if it's the same one, stated that we don't want control by the government, even if there should be regulations, because not to compare to gambling, but if free-to-play games is such that it's so addictive and it's really bad for you, let's say. Is there going to be regulation? I don't know. I mean, hopefully, if there is, we would get to control what that means. Obviously, whether you're Zynga using, back in the day, using psychiatrists to, how to get the users to stay longer and spend more. I don't know. Should that be regulated? I think that's I don't know. It's a good question, but I don't think there are any laws per se. If that answers your question. Thank you very much for coming.
And Thomas Lee's scarf.
Sorry. So I'm going to share the slides, but yeah, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me. I'll share this, I think, on the Casual Connect website. So yeah, thank you again for coming, and hope you have a great show, and see you at the party.